Hi guys, today we're going to take a look at video lesson 1.6 called Multiplying Polynomials. We're going to use this property that I know you've heard of called the distributive property on all of these problems. Let's just review the distributive property. The distributive property happens when you multiply a number outside parentheses by a sum or a difference inside the parentheses. So letter A, we have a 3 outside the parentheses. We have the sum of 5 plus 7 inside the parentheses. To distribute, you take the 3 and you multiply by the 5. That gives us 15. You take the 3 and you multiply by 7. That gives you 21. 15 plus 21 is 36. That's the distributive property. Well, we've been working on polynomial operations. And today we're going to mix it up a little bit, do some distributing, which is multiplying, and we may even throw some adding or subtracting in there. So if you look at letter B, you'll see that you have a number times a difference this time, and then you're adding a term on the end as well. Well, that term being added on the end has to be ignored for a little bit, because first we have to distribute to get rid of those parentheses. Remember, when we distribute, we multiply. So we have 5x to the first power times 3x to the second power. 5 times 3 is 15. X to the first power times x to the second power is x to the third power. Multiplying 5x times negative 8x, 5 times 8 is negative 40. X to the first times x to the first is x squared. And then hanging off the end, we have a plus 3x to the third. Now I see a couple like terms I can combine. I see a 15x to the third plus a 3x to the third. So in its most simplified form, we have 18x to the third, and we have a minus 40x squared. That's its most simplified form. We did that by distributing and then by combining like terms. Now this next one, we actually have one term outside the parentheses, and this time 3 terms inside the parentheses that we need to multiply by. We'll start with negative 2y to the fourth times 6y squared. Negative 2 times 6 is negative 12. And y to the fourth times y squared is y to the sixth. Negative 2y to the fourth times negative 8y to the third. Negative 2 times negative 8 is positive 16. And y to the fourth times y to the third is y to the seventh. And lastly, negative 2y to the fourth times 2y to the first. Negative 2 times 2 is negative 4. And y to the fourth times y to the first is y to the fifth. You end up with negative 12y to the sixth plus 16y to the seventh minus 4y to the fifth, and you're done because there are no like terms to combine. Okay, this next one has 9x to the first, y to the third. We have to multiply that by 2 terms inside these parentheses, and once we're done doing that, we will add on this last term here. Let's start with 9x to the first, y to the third, times negative 4x squared, y to the first. 9 times negative 4 is negative 36. X to the first times x squared is x to the third. Y to the third times y to the first is y to the fourth. Now we're going to multiply 9x to the first, y to the third, times negative 1x. 9 times negative 1 is negative 9. X to the first times x to the first is x squared. And y to the third, well, there's no y's over here to multiply by, so that just remains y to the third. And we have a plus 1x to the third, y to the fourth hanging off the end. We end up with these 3 terms. And if we look closely, we'll see that 2 of them have an x to the third, y to the fourth in them, which makes them like terms. So we combine them. Negative 36x to the third, y to the fourth, plus 1 x to the third y to the fourth gives you negative 35 x to the third y to the fourth. And then you have a minus 9x squared y to the third hanging off the end. Can't do any more combining, so you're done. Now the only difference with e is that the one term being multiplied through the parentheses is on the back end rather than in the front end where we're used to seeing it. But it makes no difference at all. We're still going to multiply. I'm going to do 9xyz times 3x squared yz to the fourth. 9 times 3 gives me 27. X to the first times x squared gives me x to the third. Y to the first times y to the first gives me y squared. And z to the first times z to the fourth gives me z to the fifth. Now I'm going to multiply this term on the outside times negative 8xz. 9 times negative 8 is negative 72. X times x is x squared. Y times, oh, there's no y's over here, so that y just remains as y to the first. Z to the first times z to the first is z squared. And lastly, I'm going to multiply 9xyz times 3x squared yz to the fourth. So I end up with 9 times 3, which is positive 27. X to the first times x squared is x to the third. Y to the first times y to the first is y squared. And z to the first times z to the fourth is z to the fifth. I ran out of room there, so I can rewrite this. I don't have any like terms to combine. Oh, wait, I take that back. I have a 27x to the third, y to the second, z to the fifth here. And I have a 27x to the third, y to the second, z to the fifth here. When I combine those, 27 plus 27 gives me 54. X to the third, y to the second, z to the fifth. And we have a minus 72 x squared y z squared. There's your final answer. So that was multiplying a monomial by a polynomial. The other thing we need to practice today is how to multiply two binomials. Remember, a binomial is an expression with two terms in it. We're still going to use the distributive property, but what you're going to see is that some teachers like to call this the double distributing. Because what you're going to do, for example, in letter A, is you're going to take this first term of x and multiply it through the second set of parentheses. Once you're done doing that, you're going to take this second term, 12, and multiply it through the second set of parentheses. So you're going to end up with 4 different products that you can possibly combine. So let's start with x times x, which gives you x squared. Then x times negative 3, which gives you negative 3x. So we're done multiplying that first x through the second set of parentheses. Now let's take the second term, 12, and multiply it through the second set of parentheses. 12 times x is positive 12x. 12 times negative 3 is negative 36. Now paying attention closely, you'll see that negative 3x and plus 12x, those are like terms. We can combine them. So we end up with x squared. Combining the negative 3x plus 12x, well, that's the same as doing 12x minus 3x, which is positive 9x minus 36. That's your final answer. Let's try another one. 2x times 1x is 2x squared. 2x times positive 1 is positive 2x. Now we're going to take the negative 1 through the second set of parentheses. Negative 1 times x is negative 1x. And negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. Again, you can see you can combine those middle two terms because they're like terms. They both have an x. We end up with 2x squared. 2x minus 1x is just 1x, and we have a negative 1 hanging off the end. There's your answer. Sometimes the numbers will come first and the variables second, and that's okay, because when we're done, we can rewrite our answer in standard form, which we talked about last time. 8 times 2 gives me 16. 8 times x gives me 8x. Now I'm going to take the negative x through. Negative x times 2 gives me negative 2x. And negative x times x gives me negative x squared. I notice that I can combine my 8x minus my 2x, but I also want to write this in standard form. Remember, standard form goes from the highest exponent down to no exponent. So I'm going to write my x squared term first. It's negative x squared. I'm going to combine my 8x minus my 2x, which gives me positive 6x. And then I have a plus 16 hanging off the end. Alright, so we're almost there. I just want to point out an abbreviated version of the same thing we just did. You'll notice in this letter A here, I'm asking you to take x plus 6 and square it. And a lot of you might be tempted to just say, oh, that's x squared plus 36. Because x squared is x squared, and 6 squared is 36. I hope you didn't write that down because it's wrong. I'm going to take this little eraser and I'm going to erase that because that's not correct. Think about what it really means to square something. For example, when you do 3 squared, that means 3 times 3. When you do x plus 6 squared, that means x plus 6 times x plus 6. So this is really a problem like what we had up here. It was just abbreviated with an exponent, because unlike this problem where the two factors were different, x plus 12 and x minus 3, here the two factors are the same. There's 2 x plus 6's. So we're going to solve this the same way we did these a, b, and c up here. X times x gives you x squared. X times 6 gives you 6x. Taking the second term through the second set of parentheses, 6 times x gives you 6x, and 6 times 6 gives you 36. I can combine my two x's in the middle. 6x plus 6x is 12x. You end up with x squared plus 12x plus 36 as your answer. Let's try one more of those. You'll notice that there's a squared there. You're squaring 3x minus 1. That does not mean just square the 3x and get 9x squared and just square the negative 1 and get plus 1. That is incorrect, because you're not squaring the two terms in the parentheses separately. You're actually taking this entire 3x minus 1 and you're squaring that, which means multiply it by itself. Double distributing, 3x times 3x gives you 9x squared. 3x times negative 1 gives you negative 3x. Taking now this negative 1 through the second set of parentheses, negative 1 times 3x gives you negative 3x. And negative 1 times negative 1 gives you positive 1. Combining your two middle terms, negative 3x plus another negative 3x gives you negative 6x. You end up with a solution of 9x squared minus 6x plus 1. So be ready to come in and practice this tomorrow. We're going to mix it all up, add addition and subtraction, multiplication, as we move closer and closer to our Unit 1 exam.